Shalom, shalom, beloveds. This is your Here coming with another lesson today. I just want to give all glory and praises to the Most High Yahweh and to His Son YAHAWASHI and also to the Spirit of Yahweh, the Ruach HaKodesh. So I'm coming with a very important lesson that I've not found anyone teach on, something that I feel that the Most High has impressed on my heart. I want to bring out today primarily doing the discussion on the origins of the so-called colored people of the Cape, the so-called South African colored people. A lot of our history has been clouded in mystery, and today we're going to try to attempt to demystify it, to get down to the roots and to try to understand the origins of so-called colored people and who we really are from a biblical perspective. So I want to invite you all to stay tuned, buckle up your seatbelts, and let's jump into the first video. I just want to ask you guys to check out this first video, and then once we're done there, then we're going to jump into the rest.
And the Lord shall scatter thee among all people, from the one end of the earth even unto the other, and there thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone. The scattering of the Israelites, Deuteronomy 28:64 states, And the Lord shall scatter thee among all people, from the one end of the earth even unto the other. This scattering signifies a divine punishment for the Israelites' disobedience, indicating a widespread dispersion across the globe. This physical scattering of the Israelites from their homeland is a direct result of their failure to uphold the covenant with God. It symbolizes not only a loss of their geographical and political center, but also a dispersion of their cultural and religious unity. Serving other gods. The verse continues with a warning, And there thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone. And there thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone. This interpretation typically focuses on the literal and historical aspect of the curse. The Israelites, in foreign lands, would be compelled to adopt the worship practices of their captors, which included idols made from materials like wood and stone. The modern application of this verse to the worship of money is an allegorical or symbolic interpretation. In this view, wood could be seen as representing paper money, which is indeed derived from trees. This interpretation suggests that just as the ancient Israelites were led to worship foreign gods made of wood and stone, modern descendants of the Israelites are ensnared by the worship of money. From Babylon to Timbuktu, a history of the ancient black races, including the Black Hebrews. By Rudolph R. Windsor on page 83 reads, In the year 65 BC, the Roman armies under General Pompey captured Jerusalem. In 70 AD, General Vespasian and his son Titus put an end to the Jewish state with great slaughter. During the period of the military governors of Palestine, many outrages and atrocities were committed against the residue of the people. During the period from Pompey to Julius, it has been estimated that over 1 million Jews fled into Africa, fleeing from Roman persecution and slavery. The slave markets were full of black Jewish slaves. The Roman period, spanning from the 1st century BCE to the 1st century CE, was a pivotal era in the history of the Judeans, marked by significant events that drastically altered their socio-political and religious landscape. The Roman conquest of Judea, culminating in the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE by General Titus, and the Bar Kokhba revolt from 132 to 135 CE, were critical events that not only reshaped Judean society, but also led to a profound and far-reaching scattering of the Judean population. The Roman conquest began a phase of direct imperial control over Judea. This period was characterized by increasing tensions between the Judeans and the Roman authorities, largely due to religious and cultural differences, as well as heavy taxation and political oppression. The Judeans' strong adherence to their monotheistic faith and their resistance to Roman paganism often put them at odds with the Roman rulers, leading to social unrest and rebellious uprisings. This event was followed by the Bar Kokhba revolt, led by Simon Bar Kokhba, which further intensified the conflict between the Judeans and the Romans. The revolt initially achieved some successes, but ultimately it was brutally crushed by the Romans. The aftermath was devastating. Jerusalem was razed and the survivors were sold into slavery, executed, or fled. The combined effects of these events resulted in the widespread dispersion of the Judean population. This scattering was both a forced migration, due to enslavement and escape from persecution, and a voluntary movement in search of safer and more prosperous lives. On Africans. The Bible is only concerned with the scattered lost tribes of Israel. Hamites are not Semites. African tribes are not Israelite tribes. In an evocative ancient scene, we witness the historical journey of the Israelites as they make a dramatic escape into the interior of Africa, seeking refuge from relentless persecution. This poignant imagery brings to life their arduous passage through vast, untamed landscapes, a vivid testament to their resilience and determination. Clad in the garb of their heritage, these Israelites are seen carrying the weight of their belongings, and more importantly, the responsibility of their families, as they traverse the rugged, uncharted terrains of Africa. The backdrop is a striking canvas of natural beauty and harsh reality, towering mountains and dense forests that speak of a land untouched by time, yet fraught with the challenges of the unknown. In the faces of these travelers, there is a palpable blend of weariness and resolve. Their eyes, while reflecting the fatigue of a long journey, also burn with the hope of establishing new kingdoms, new communities where they might thrive once more. What stands out in this scene is not just the physical journey, but the spiritual and cultural odyssey that these people embark upon. Far removed from their origins, the Israelites face the daunting task of preserving their customs and beliefs in a land vastly different from their own. The absence of teachers or guides in this new world underscores their isolation, highlighting the struggle to maintain their identity in a land so far from home. This image captures more than a moment in time. It encapsulates the enduring spirit of a people determined to rebuild and retain their cultural identity against all odds. The location of the lost tribes, which were transported on cargo slave ships, is extensive. We will revisit this topic in more detail in a later class. However, for the sake of visual understanding, we will reveal the location in the Western Hemisphere. Brazil. And the Lord shall scatter you among the nations, and ye shall be left few in number among the heathen, whither the Lord shall lead you. Cuba. I will scatter them among nations that neither they nor their ancestors have known, and I will pursue them with the sword until I have made an end of them. Haiti. I swore to them in the wilderness that I would scatter them among the nations and disperse them through the countries, because they had not obeyed my laws, but had rejected my decrees, and desecrated my Sabbaths, and their eyes lusted after their parents' idols. Jamaica. So they were scattered because there was no shepherd, and when they were scattered they became food for all the wild animals. My sheep wandered over all the mountains, and on every high hill. They were scattered over the whole earth, and no one searched or looked for them. Barbados. St. Kitts. Trinidad. Remember the instruction you gave your servant Moses, saying, "If you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the nations." Guadeloupe. Martinique. The Bahamas. Grenada. St. Lucia. The Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico. The whole United States. Remember the instruction you gave your servant Moses, saying, "If you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the nations." Canada is part of British North America. They will fall by the sword and will be taken as prisoners to all the nations. Jerusalem will be trampled on by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. Mexico is part of Spanish America. I scattered them with a whirlwind among all the nations, where they were strangers. The land they left behind them was so desolate that no one traveled through it. This is how they made the pleasant land desolate. Central America is part of Spanish America. South America is part of Spanish America, French America, Dutch colonies, Portuguese America. Louisiana is part of French America. Suriname is part of Dutch colonies. Guyana partially as part of Dutch colonies. Antigua and Barbuda as part of British and French territories in the Lesser Antilles. St. Vincent and the Grenadines as part of British and French territories in the Lesser Antilles. United States Virgin Islands, formerly Danish West Indies.
I hope you paid attention to that, fam, and also to the scriptures that were being brought out there. So you might probably be asking yourself, now what does this have to do with the history of Cape Colored people? So in the video, he was basically mentioning the parts of the Western Hemisphere and also the Dutch colonies. So there's also another Dutch colony that I want to bring out, and that is the Cape Colony. And basically, I just want to bring out what is the definition, or what does Google understand colored to be. So the communities designated as colored are primarily descended from the Khoisan people who originally inhabited western parts of South Africa from Asian and African slaves. So I want to primarily focus on that, the Khoisan part, the Asian slave part, and the African slave part. So it says that these are what basically the main things of what constitutes a so-called colored person today. And it also says the category of colored persons was used to refer to all people of mixed race, and they included various ethnic groups such as Hottentots, Bushmen, Cape Malays, Griquas, Koranas, Creoles, Negroes, and Cape Coloreds. So these were all the people that were classed within the groups of colored. And I also want to then specifically take the time out and highlight how each of these groups are all tied in with the Hebrews or the Israelites of the Bible, the migration and the scattering of the Jews, how this all ties in. So this is also basically the slave routes of the Dutch or East India Company. And they basically during the 16th century, they had the monopoly on the global slave trade of slaves. And it was specifically going after slaves of Hebrew or Jew origin. And we're going to specifically highlight that out. So before we get started, just to remember the slavery, this is at the Slave Lodge. I've personally been there myself, and this building does exist, and this is real actual history. So it says here that we are the descendants of slaves from the parts of Africa and Madagascar, from India and Indonesian archipelago. So now this is basically tells you where most of the slaves came from. So the majority of them came from Africa, Madagascar, and India. And then also a small percentage of them also came from the Indonesian islands as well. And these were slaves actually at the Cape Colony. Most African slaves were from East and Central Africa, Mozambique, Malawi, Zambia, and Congo. And then the earliest African slaves were from Angola and then of the coast of Guinea. So bear all of this in mind as to where the slaves, the slaves that were brought to the Cape Colony, where were they brought from and who were these people? So these were actual slaves that were alive during the Cape Colony, that they were actually be able to take pictures from. So just take a moment and reflect on this, as this is very important history that was tried to erase. You know, during the apartheid government, they did try to erase this history. So after slavery ended at the Cape, the government encouraged migrant labor. From 1860s to the 1920s, refugee migrants and indentured labor was encouraged. So where were these migrants and indentured workers from? So many of them were from West Africa, the Kru people, the cities from East African coast, the Zanzibaris, the saints from St. Helena, the Botswana, and it says many of these refugee migrants and endangered laborers integrated into the colored population. This is also very interesting just to bear in mind. So all my people bear all of this history in mind. So I'm going to play a short clip just to emphasize the slaves of Indian origin that came to the Cape.
And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people which shall be left from Assyria, and from Egypt, and from Pathros, and from Cush, and from Elam, and from Shinar, and from Hamath, and from the islands of the sea. And he shall set up an ensign for the nations, and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. Now the Dutch East Indian slave ship Merman, between the 1600s to the 1700s AD, was regularly transporting anywhere from 150 to 400 slaves annually from South India, Burma, and Bengal. The Dutch seized Portuguese settlements on the Malabar coast in India in the mid-1600s, and because of this, large number of slaves were sent to the Indian state of Kerala, to Batavia, which is in Java, Indonesia, Ceylon, which is Sri Lanka, or Elam, and the Cape in South Africa, and elsewhere to work on plantations. Many of these so-called East Indians were kidnapped by the Muslims and sold at the city called Cochin to the Dutch slaveholders. The Arab slave trade of the East African Baptist Israelites during the 8th century shipped slaves all across the Eastern Hemisphere, including Madagascar. By the 16th century AD, the Dutch, including the other European countries, got involved with the capturing of slaves from East Africa, Madagascar, the Malabar coast, the Coromandel coast, Bengal, and Indonesia. But during the 18th century, a high number of slaves in indentured service were taken from India and East Africa to do slave work in the Americas, the Caribbean, and South Africa, which was called the Cape. Now, does this hint to the curses of Israel? Now wait till you see some of the Hebrew influences in the language of these South Asian nations. The language of South India is Tamil and Malayalam, and the language of Sri Lanka is Tamil and Sinhalese. The first century Roman historian Cornelius Tacitus, who lived in the 1st century AD, had these thoughts on the Hebrews. In his literary work, Histories 5.2-5, he writes about the Hebrews. Many again say that they are a race of Ethiopian origin, while other translations read, many assert that the Hebrews are a race of Ethiopian origins. Now, if the early Hebrews were a race of Ethiopian origin, they must have been black to look upon, as the meaning of the word Ethiopian can be linked to the Greek word meaning burnt faces or dark skin tones. Now, these characteristics and skin complexion in ancient times were only attributed to a people who lived in Africa and all the way across the Arabian Sea to India and Asia. Now, there was a Greek historian named Ephorus who lived during 400 BC who quoted, "The Eastern Ethiopians, for two nations of this name served in. The Ethiopians were considered as occupying all the south coasts of both Asia and Africa." And he added that this is an ancient opinion of the Greeks. Now, the Greek historian Herodotus, who lived during 490 BC, he quoted that the Eastern Ethiopians, for two nations of the same name, served in the army, were marshaled with the Indians. They differed in nothing from the other Ethiopians, save in their language and the character of their hair. For the Eastern Ethiopians have straight hair, while they of Libya or Africa are more woolly haired than any other people in the world. migration. As early as the 12th century AD, mention is made of the black Jews in southern India and the native black Semitic people they lived amongst in exile. The Gentile Jewish traveler from Spain, Benjamin of Tudela, speaking of Kolam on the Malabar coast, writes his itinerary. Throughout the island, including all the towns thereof, live several thousand Israelites. The inhabitants are all black, and the Jews also. Now these people later became known as the Black Malabar Jews in Kerala, India, and later the Gentile Sephardic Jews around the time of the 15th century AD would mysteriously find their way to India, where these Sephardic immigrants would be known as the Paradesi white Jews. Now the descendants of the Black Malabar or Cochin Jews had their DNA analyzed. In a 2009 DNA report confirmed that the Ethiopian Jews of Beta Israel and the Indian Jews of Benai Israel and Cochin have similarities in their DNA. Now one chronicle in India tells how a group of Jews descended from the Assyrian exile of the 10 northern tribes made their way to Calicut, Kerala by way of Arabia, Yemen. And a Malayalam Jewish song from Kerala, India suggested the Jews of the ancient town of Pellora may have come from Yemen. It is a known fact that many of the dialects of Malayalam in South India have traces of Assyrian, Aramaic, and Hebrew influences. Now in regards to the Greeks were classified as black Ethiopians and black Egyptians under the term Ethiops, Nubian, and Niger, simply because these names were associated with dark-skinned people. English archaeologist Sir Godfrey Higgins, who lived in the 1700s, would write the following about the Ethiopians. According to many ancient testimonies, the inhabitants of Sudan, Egypt, Arabia, Palestine, Western Asia, and India were Ethiopians, therefore Africans. Back in that era, there were two lands called Ethiopia, one on the east of the Red Sea and the other on the west of it. And a very great nation of blacks from India did rule almost all over Asia in a very remote era. Physician and scientist Samuel George Morton proved in the 1844 AD Crania Egyptica study that there was a clear distinction between the Negro and native Egyptians. With craniometry comparison of ancient Egyptian skulls and sub-Saharan Negro skulls from West Africa, Morton proved that the Egyptian ruling elite class of ancient Egypt had a different skull shape than the subservient slave class at the time. Now, whose skull matched up perfectly with the subservient slave class, which in the Bible was the Hebrew Israelites? The sub-Saharan Bantus Negro skull. Now, this proves that the ancient Egyptians and the sub-Saharan Bantus people were two different people.
Colored people will not acknowledge that they have Nguni ancestors or Sutu ancestors and so on. And I've explained how this is a reality. In fact, only 2.5%, by the way, had European ancestry. So the concept of colored people are born of miscegnation is actually not borne out by the facts either.
So I hope that helps to, demystify some of the history surrounding some of the colored people. We do see there that some Hebrews from India or some Jews from India were shipped to the Cape Colony. And then, we also do see that only a small minority of so-called colored people are actually mixed with European descent. Most so-called colored people are straight up descendants of slaves, Khoi people, or different Bantu ethnic groups. So I just want to bring out this source here from the book called The Negro in the New World on page 27. And at the end it reads at the bottom that the Jews are composed of 3 or 4 separate racial elements. The Asiatic Negro strain shows itself occasionally in the curly hair, the long eye, and the proportions of the skull. The Jewish hybrids with the Negro in Jamaica and Guyana produce most strikingly the Assyrian type. It is quite conceivable that the Great Peninsula of Arabia was once populated as far as its natural conditions allowed by a primitive Negro stock. So the original people of Palestine, of the Arabian Peninsula, were people of Negro people. Now we also see that the Struntloper people also had prognathous skulls, which were the servant class of ancient Egypt, and we see that the prognathous people and the Egyptians had different skulls. Now, the Struntloper people were also known as the Khoikhoi people, who were herders who migrated to southern Africa as well. And we're going to see, and I'm going to bring out how they also have Israelite customs, and there are also Jews, and the first Europeans that actually encountered them, they all said that they had eyewitness accounts of their language bearing Hebrew, and them also having Hebrew customs. So let me bring out some of those sources. So this is the first source that I'm going to bring out from the book called The Black Jews in Africa and the Americas from Dr. Tudor Parfit. And here is one of the governors of the Cape Colony. I'm not sure if he was the first or the second governor, but he is quoted here as making similarities between the Jews and the Khoisan. He says, suppose that it is from the Jews that the inhabitants of the remoter parts have learned the practice of circumcision. And more towards the end it reads, from the Jews also the natives near us must have acquired the practice of removing the left testicle, if you will excuse the mention of it. Indeed, who is so blind as not to see that it is from the Israelites that both divisions of the Hottentots have derived all their sacerdotal and sacrificial rites. An actual Dutch governor that lived during that time, an eyewitness said that you have to be blind to see how these people's customs are not derived from the ancient Israelites. And he goes on here further to say, the same governor, I'm of the opinion, he wrote, that the language of the natives has something in common with Hebrew, for it seems to consist of guttural liables, dentals, linguals, and other sounds that fall with difficulty from the lips and are hard for us to pronounce. So why would they have elements of Hebrew in their language if they're not the Hebrews? I'm gonna maybe go into maybe a part 2 of this video, also maybe breaking down the Hebrew elements in the Khoi language, but also just to bring out another source as well, just to bring out also another primary source as well, the knowledge and colonialism 18th century travelers in South Africa, just to also bring out more customs. So this is an eyewitness account, Peter Kolb, who lived among the Khoi people, and this is just a list of customs or things that he saw resemblance with the Khoi culture and also the ancient Israelite culture. And here's some, you can take a screenshot of it and go through it yourself just for verification, and then also do your own research. But I just want to bring out what he says here. He says, in my view, one can denounce from this that they are ancient African peoples who, because they were always chased away and driven further and further from their original place of residence, are a mixture of Jews who moved here and of other African, especially Carthaginian peoples. In the end, they wandered to the extreme tip of this country and settled down there and formed a community. Because there have been so many nations, they borrowed customs from each other, which resulted in the loss of their own customs. Also, what really stands out for me about this source is how he mentions that the Khoi people were constantly chased away from their further and further from their original place of residence. Now, this sounds exactly like the curses and the prophecies that would befall Israel. And this exactly ties in with the dispersion of the Israelites or the Jews when Vespasian Titus destroyed the temple in 70 AD, and the Israelites were dispersed and persecuted. So through the persecution, it caused them to flee deeper and deeper within Africa. So just to also bring out another source as well from the Jewish Quarterly from the year 1903. So this was even before the state of Israel was established. So this shows you more ancient sources, and it says here on page 641 that by turns the English, the Irish, the North American Indians, and the Hottentots, we have been assured of Hebrew descent. So there you have another witness as well that our people are of Israelite origin. And there's also just another witness as well. Now here's from the Israelite Worldwide. This is also another Jewish source, and it says that an Israelite population already inhabited the inland heart of Africa, Black Africa, at the time.
It is recorded by John Leo Africanus, a 15th century geographer and historian. In a translation of his book, A Geographical History of Africa by John Pottery, Africanus records that at the beginning of the Ethiopian Hebrew Empire founded by King Solomon, there inhabited a most populous nation of Jewish stock. So even since the time of King Solomon in the early BCs, like 900 BCs, there's already been a known fact that there were Israelite kingdoms in Central Africa known as Congo. Now this is what an actual Israelite that we know about, who can prove their lineage going all the way back to King Solomon, Haile Selassie. This is actually what the ancient Jews look like. Now here's also another source as well, a Jewish source from the Talmud, Sanhedrin 94, and it says here, where did Sennacherib exile the 10 tribes? Mar Zutra says he exiled them to Africa, and Rabbi Hanina says to the Seluch Mountains. So the Seluch Mountains means the snow-capped mountains. So it says in Africa by the snow-capped mountains. So there's only one mountain range as far as I'm concerned that is all snow-capped all year round, and that is the Kilimanjaro Mountains. So according to that source, that it says that the 10 tribes would be beyond the rivers of Ethiopia and beyond the snow-capped mountains. Now here's also another source, and here's also just a sign, like an actual official sign in the Cape before apartheid was actually institutionalized, just to show that, you know, the oppression of black and colored people go way back, and our people were despised the same, and we were hated the same, and we were oppressed the same, just as the scriptures prophesy.
I'm just going to bring out some sources pertaining to the West African and to the Malagasy heritage of so-called colored people, and I'm going to use this book From Babylon to Timbuktu, written by Rudolph R. Windsor, A History of the Ancient Black Races, including the Black Hebrews. And it says here that the Jews among the Ashantis of the Gold Coast, Ghana, are found Jews who observe many Hebrew customs. So I just want to bring out that some of the first slaves, as I brought out there, were brought from the coast of Guinea and from the coast of Angola. Now here's also the same source as well on age 32, the Jews of the Malagasy Republic. There is an island near the southeastern coast of Africa called the Malagasy Republic. The old name of this island was Madagascar. Near the eastern part of this island, on the Isle of St. Mary, there exists a group of black Jews who call themselves Zafim Ibrahim. So there's another source that proving that the people brought from Malagasy to the Cape were indeed Israelites. Now here's another source as well, the perspectives on French colonial Madagascar. And here it reads, for the purposes 2 points are critical. The mystery of Malagasy origins and the Jewish thesis were respectively contentious and widely discussed at the time of God's musings. They were, moreover, profoundly interconnected and tied to notions of a remote, purer Malagasy part. This is the context in which we should understand the proliferation of assertions that Jews were prominent in Madagascar's ethnic makeup. The idea of ancient Jewish roots in Madagascar goes back to well before grandeur. So it's very clear that even since, some sources say even since Old Testament times, that there was an Israelite kingdom in on the island of Madagascar. And this can be confirmed through various sources and through their own oral history, and as well through the curses, as well as many so-called colored people today are descendants of the Malagasys as well. Now here's also just another scripture I just want to bring out. I found this very relevant. It's here that the largest slave trade in history of the world was created by white Christian Europeans. Before, it was over as many as 60 million Africans would be killed for the profit of white Christian imperialism. So here Daniel 9 and 12, he hath confirmed his words which he spake against us and against our judges that judged us by bringing upon us a great evil. For under the whole heaven hath not been done as hath been done upon Jerusalem. So there the Most High clearly says that the things that he has done upon the Israelites, it has not been done unto anyone under heaven, you know. So the fact that we are experiencing these curses and going through these things, it's not a coincidence. It's because the Most High said that no one under heaven would go through the things that, you know, his chosen would go through. So it's not a coincidence that we're going through these curses. So I just want to bring out some stats here, some official stats from SA of the year. I think it's 2017, and it says that black and colored headed households were the only two groups that were classified as chronically poor. So only black and colored households are living at the bottom of society, literally living at the bottom of the socio-economic ladder. Now this is exactly a fulfillment of prophecy. This is no coincidence, because scripture says, I think it's in Jeremiah chapter 50, I'll bring it out, that the house of Judah and the house of Israel, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, would be oppressed together. And this is a fulfillment of the Deuteronomy 28 verse 43 curse that says, the stranger that is within thee shall get up above thee very high, and thou shalt come down very low. He shall lend to thee, and thou shalt not lend to him. He shall be the head, and thou shalt be the tail. So now we see that the people that are the tail, meaning the bottom of society, are the so-called colored and black folk. So it's time for the oppressed people to unite and claim back what's ours. So it's just to share another video. So I'm just going to share the last video in closing. Please take a look at this.
This book of the origin and history, etc. of the colored people, 1841, James W. C. Pennington. Watch this. Let's zoom in. A stronger case still is to be found in the fact that the descendants of a colony of Jews, originally from Judea to the coast of Africa, are black. Do y'all see that? Do y'all see that?
So there you have it, fam. This is all part of prophecy. This is just Jubilees 23 and 26. In those days the children shall begin to study the laws and to seek the commandments and to return to the path of righteousness. So this is all prophecy, fam. Us returning, you know, to the laws, us seeking out who our ancient forefathers are. So I just want to encourage each and every one of you to go and do your own research, to pray, to fast, seek the face of the Most High, and return back to our most precious heritage. And yes, just know that you are the chosen of the Most High, the apple of the Most High's eyes. And with that, I just want to give all praises to the Most High Yahweh and to His Son YAHAWASHI. And with that, I want to give all blessings and praises and shalom to you all.
I know what it feels like to be sat down and cleaned up and had to change your mind, but the chastisement of the Most High gets you right every time. Beauty from ashes, beauty from ashes, beauty from ashes, beauty from ashes.
Yeah. Hey family, I'm with you. A people so broken with too many tears. Someone get the tissue. No more hiding the sin. Don't bury it deep, but let's bring up the issues.